So, hi, I want to talk today about my final project, which hits close to home in Vista, California. This is where economic growth through craft breweries is colliding with long-standing housing inequities. And so, my project is called Tapped Out, the intersection of brewery growth and housing inequity in Vista. And it's using data mapping to explore this issue. So, I'll start with introducing myself very briefly. So I'm Pilar. I'm actually native to Vista, California, which is why I took an interest in this topic. I'm a data analyst and storyteller. I have a background in journalism, and which is why I really like being able to tell compelling stories with data. And I have some experience in different tools like SQL, Python, Tableau, and I've built dashboards for a couple different companies when I've worked with them in the past. Currently pursuing a master's in big data analytics at San Diego State University. I'll be completing that at the end of the year. Um, I've worked for different companies in e-commerce, media, and so on. So let's dive into this topic. So I took a personal interest in this topic because, as I said, I am from Vista, California, and Vista is known for its booming craft beer industry with about 25 microbreweries and counting. It's celebrated for as a local economic success story. But beneath that success, there is a pattern. Breweries are opening in neighborhoods where Latino renters already face severe housing cost burdens. And so I wanted to see what that could look like on a map. Um, and so the focus is, as I just mentioned, Latino renter households in Vista, many of whom are first generation or immigrant families with deep roots in the city. And my personal tie to this is around, I want to say like 5 years ago, my parents were displaced in Vista, California after renting for more than 15 years in that neighborhood. And this was a gradual thing. So over time, a brewery popped up, the rents increased, the ownership of the apartment complex was sold a couple times. Rents continue to go up. We saw cafes popping up near us, trendy supermarkets like Sprouts, which is not something that would generally serve the demographic of the neighborhood, as there's like a Northgate, which is a more Hispanic Latino grocery store. And so the signs were there over time. And then eventually the apartments were sold to a commercial entity, which wanted to remodel the apartments to eventually really steepen the rent cost. So they were displaced. Um, and so yeah, this isn't an anomaly. This happens everywhere around the world, gentrification. And so I wanted to kind of understand it in Vista and see the trend. So now let's get into the case study. So I part of doing this was having to find the different breweries in Vista. There wasn't one place that had a very updated list of all of them. There were some that were pretty well known already, but there was a couple that actually were posted as being active, but actually didn't exist anymore. So that was probably the first part of the project, like cross-validation of where all these microbreweries existed in Vista. Some of it was knowledge that I knew because I lived there, and maybe there's something you wouldn't find online unless you search for it. And then I also just used Google Maps to help me figure out if it was active or not. So that was the process, at least with the microbreweries. Um, and then the second part was finding finding data from the census data to identify Latino household renters who are using 50% of their income or more to pay for rent. So to me, that is already an indication that you aren't living a sustainable life if you're putting 50% or more on your income. And that's almost like a formula for you're more likely to be displaced because if something were to happen, you may or may not exactly have the funds if you needed to pay for more rent and whatnot. So that is what I did. And then I also just for the infographic insights, I added an image of the apartment complex where I grew up and where my parents lived for, I think, 15 plus years. And just to give you an idea of what that looked like. And um, my family and neighbors were pushed out. And this is, again, probably a similar story to a lot of other Latino low-income immigrant households in this area. So let's go into the map I created. So like I already explained, I used the brewery location mapping, demographic overlays, and then this created the hotspots or cluster mapping, and then there's a focus on 92083, 92084 zip codes, and you can see that here. So I'll zoom in a little bit. So here, this is representing downtown Vista, which makes sense that there's a lot more breweries. And then down here, this is actually more of the industrial area of where there are more breweries. I understand that it's easier to open up a brewery when you're in this area because of permit reasonings if you're not in downtown. So this makes sense. And so the other part of, and also this red outline here is Vista, the boundary of the city of Vista. So you have an idea of like what we're looking at when we talk about Vista. Um, so the other important part that I think provides a bit more insight into this map is the coloring. So the darker the census tract area is an indication that it is Latino household that is putting 50% or more of their income into paying rent. So in areas here that is close to downtown or in downtown, you can see that that is dark. And then down here as well, where there are a lot of breweries. So you see that there is a potential relationship with the burden of paying so much rent and being next to a brewery, or at least in somewhat close proximity. And so yeah, that's kind of what occurred to us. We lived in 1219 Arcadia Avenue, and then here is the close brewery prohibition. This is basically like walking distance or a pretty short car ride. But over time there was the signs and then other trendy cafes that popped up. So I think that is quite interesting to see that trend in other parts of the city. Okay, so lastly, we have the targeted UN Sustainable Development Goals. So some of these are to promote inclusive, safe, reliant, sustainable urban development, address economic disparities, support housing stability. I think that's yeah, really important. I think looking back, if we had access to more resources and how we could maybe advocate for ourselves, maybe it would have played out differently. I think I wish I could have helped my parents more at the time, but I just didn't have the bandwidth as a full-time student that was also just trying to survive. So I think the call to action would be to contact the city council to support rent stabilization, eviction protection, and then also join local advocacy efforts. Like you don't need to start from scratch. You just need to reach out to the folks that already have been doing the work. So the Vista Community Clinic or North County Equity and Justice Coalition that are working on housing justice. So yeah, I this was a pretty awesome project. I'd like to keep sort of just maybe adding more indicators. I think it could be a lot more meaningful if I actually partner up with like maybe a nonprofit already doing some of this work or surveying community members, people that are affected, to kind of get more insight from people affected on the issue, and then also following the policy that could potentially help communities.